Now we know that they are divided into different categories, and we can use our Dear King Philip came over for good spaghetti. They're divided into our domains, kingdoms, phylums, classes, orders, families, genus, and species. But what made this initial branch? What branched all of this out from the initial domains, or even into the domains, and then branched them out further into species? For this to make sense, we're going to come up with a lot of examples, because you can explain this, but without a specific example, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. For example, let's say there are two plots of land. One person waters their lawn a lot, so it's very green. One person does not, so it's kind of dead and yellow and orange. This has been consistently happening for years. This person has never watered their lawn, it always has looked terrible. This person always kept it really nice. So, on the left, say you have a bug. He is colored very green, almost the same as this plot of land. So if we have a big bird or some predator of this bug flying over, it's very hard to spot. Over in this plot of land, we have the same species of beetle, but it's just a different color. It is that same predator bird who likes to eat it, but again, it's very hard to spot. It's almost camouflaged on this plot of land. In our made-up scenario, a big old fire comes in, and it burns up the very dry, dead plot of land. In order to not die, this beetle has to migrate over here. However, now that he is over on the nicely watered lawn, he is bright orange and he sticks out. So our predator bird up here is going to be able to see him much easier than it can see the other green guy. So he's actually probably going to get eaten more often than the green guy. Even though at one time being orange was nice, it has now changed the environment because his old environment burned up, and so now being orange is bad and being green is good. Since we have a predator that just wants to eat whatever it can find, it's going to attack whatever it can see first. It has actually selected the orange color to be bad. This process is called natural selection. Nature has selected the orange to die, essentially, because it's deemed the trait of orange color to be what we call unfit. Now, don't think of fitness as in like going to the gym. Fitness for animals, when we're talking about traits, is how likely they are to survive. The better the trait is to survive in your environment, the more fit you are. So now extrapolate this over years and years and years, sometimes hundreds, sometimes millions. You eventually are going to have nature select certain things that is beneficial and some that are not. Even if there are other orange beetles in the green lawn, the bird will find and kill them before they're able to find each other and procreate and have babies and pass on their orange trait, their genes that contain the orange color. The green guy, however, can run around with all the females he wants because all the green females are kind of hiding from the bird, and so is he. So over time, you would have lots of green bugs, and the orange ones would slowly die off. And that trait is completely wiped out. Nature is going to do this anytime there is a change or anytime something happens. So let's go back to the beginning. What actually caused this beetle, even though it's the same species, why is this guy green? Why is this guy orange? To understand that, we have to go back to our DNA. We know that in our DNA are all these little nitrogen bases, part of our nucleotide, our monomer, that code for all of the traits. If you have the mom's DNA and the dad's DNA over here, the offspring is going to have something in the middle. It's going to have a little bit of a combination of both. It's not going to have all of one or all the other. However, when encoding this and when creating this offspring, when it's making this baby, there's almost 6 feet of DNA per cell. So especially early on, it's very easy for there to be basically a genetic typo. This means that in here, everything can go perfect, except right here, this thing is switched. Remember our base pair rule? Apples go with trees, cars go with garages. So if an A is switched, starts out as an A, and it gets messed up and it goes as a C, that means this other side is also no longer T, it is now G. Genetic code is going to cause a different trait. So instead of having A here, maybe the DNA is red, and with the A, this would have been our green bug. But now with the C, the color of the bug is orange. This is called a mutation. This can be completely random. It can be a good mutation, it can be a bad mutation. So for example, a good mutation would be if you have a bunch of cheetahs and one is super fast, like faster than the others. That cheetah is probably going to be able to survive a little bit more because it can catch prey easier. On the other end of the spectrum, if you have one that is abnormally slow, or their mutation, maybe their muscles don't form right, their joint isn't exactly in the same position, so they're not as fast, that's a bad mutation. It would cause them to get less prey, which makes it less likely that they can survive and reproduce, which means it's a bad trait and the fitness is poor. Now, nature is not actually reading the environment and selecting a mutation. The mutation can be completely random. Sometimes, like I said, it's good, it's bad, maybe you don't even know it. For example, in humans, blue eyes are a mutation. However, the blue-eyed people aren't getting killed by lions more than the brown-eyed people, so the fitness isn't really affected. It's more of an aesthetic, they just have that. If something is a very poor trait, it usually gets weeded out. Like if someone was born with half of a heart or a very small heart, chances are that person had problems and wasn't able to make it to sexual maturity and reproduce and pass on that gene. Now, one of the reasons why we still have so many of these diseases and they haven't been completely eradicated is because of our use of modern medicine. Because of the modern medicine and technology, we can keep people alive that have a genetic disorder. This enables them to actually pass on those genes that were actually unfit, and now they are still kind of swirling around in the gene pool. Now in nature, this happens with all kinds of traits. It can happen with speed, it can happen with body weight, it can happen with color, it can happen with all the traits coded in the DNA. The mutation happens, if it's good, it is going to continue to reproduce and pass on that gene, which means its offspring are going to be better than the other offspring of normal stuff. And as you can see, the frequency of the mutation is going to go up. So over time, we'll get more and more green guys. You might occasionally have a mutation and you get your orange guy again, but chances are that bird's still going to see him and he's going to get killed. So the initial guy to kind of come up with all this was Charles Darwin. He's kind of considered the person to put natural selection together. He has a famous study where he was looking at finches and he was looking at these birds. And he noticed that even though they were kind of the same species of bird, they had very differently developed beaks. Some of the beaks were larger and he figured out that that was to crush open seeds and nuts. And some of them were narrow and that was to get in to find tiny little bugs and other stuff from trees. Basically their beaks were tools and they were shaped differently to do different jobs. So he didn't really understand why they would have this. He's like, what made this bird develop a different type of beak? Why does this bird over here have 6 eggs and 5 of them have big fat beaks and 1 of them has a small needle-like beak on this side of the island? And then on the other side of the island, another bird has 6 babies in its nest, but 4 or 5 of them have the needle beak and only 1 or 2 of them have the big fat beak. He was trying to click together why this all happened. So as far as looking at it from a scientific perspective, so we can actually graph this and show what the environment is doing or what the environment is trying to do based on the traits. So let's use butterflies just because, I don't know, I can draw it, it's easy. So we have our butterflies. You have 3 different traits. Let's say this is all the same species of butterfly. Just by mutations, you have a blue, a purple, and a red butterfly. So in scenario 1, let's say the population exhibits kind of a bell curve, which means that you're going to have some rare colors and some common colors. We'll go ahead and place purple right here in the middle. Blue is over here, and red is over here to the right. So on the bottom we have the color, and on the left we're actually going to have the population. That means the higher up we go on the left, the more of that color we're going to have in that area or of that species. You can have 3 types of disruptions or changes to the environment that is actually going to change this, because you're going to have an average of everything. You're always going to have the rarities and the outliers of the mutations, but eventually nature is going to kind of have an average, similar to how humans have an average height. You have people who are 7'5", you have people who are 3'5", but you have an average where most people fall into that range. Scenario 1, you have all these butterflies in a field. There are some blue flowers, there are some purple flowers, and there are some red flowers. Say all of your blue flowers die. Your blue population is not going to have anywhere to look camouflaged, so they're probably going to get hurt significantly. A lot of the purple flowers also die, So we're going to significantly reduce our population of purple butterflies. Red is going to get a bump. There are going to be a lot of red flowers. And since flowers are an organism, they can actually mutate too. Let's say we have a new color of this flower emerge. That means you're going to have butterflies that are born pink have a little bit of something to survive in. Normally the pink didn't fit in anywhere, but because of mutation, the pink can survive over here. Now we can graph our new one. Rare purples become our common red, become our rare pinks. What we've done is we've actually taken the graph and taken the exact curve we already had and shifted it. Right. The entire population has shifted so that blues aren't even able to survive anymore. This is called directional selection. This means that the entire thing has been shifted over. So in this scenario, this is what the population of the flowers would have been. Blue went from 5 blue flowers to 0, purple went from 10 to 5, red went from 5 to 10, and pink, which didn't exist before, so it went from 0 to 5. This could be an example of the population of our flowers. Flowers. And if the flowers are its main source of camouflage for the butterfly, then the butterfly traits have to shift as well. Nature has selected these butterflies to survive and these butterflies to die. Alright, so scenario 2, let's say our 5 blue flowers went to 0, our 10 purple flowers went to 15, and our 5 red flowers went to 0. What has happened is we've decreased blue, increased purple, and decreased red for our butterflies also. What that's going to do is it's basically going to get rid of stuff on the ends. It's going to get rid of our extremes. So our blues and our reds are going to start to die off almost to where they don't exist anymore, but the purples increase to balance out the environment. So this gets shifted over to here where nothing really even exists until it's somewhere close to purple. The purples are going to become more common. So we're going to get a graph that looks like this, where the outliers disappear and the average increases. This is called stabilizing selection. Basically, the population has almost stabilized in the center, so the average is even more than it normally was. However, because of this, and because you don't have a lot of different colors and a lot of diversity, you actually kind of made this more fragile as far as like a butterfly ecosystem. If you have a big disease come in that wipes out all the purple flowers, the entire species could go extinct, because there's no more blue or no more red butterflies to save the species from getting wiped out entirely. Remember, the more diverse your population is, the more traits you have, you can actually make your population stronger and a little bit more resistant to disruptions and disasters and stuff like that. If a disease pops up in humans that kills all the blonde people, the human race as a whole will still survive. But if you had a disease pop up with something that everybody has, like that affected every single human on the planet's heart, then we're out of luck. We don't have any humans floating around with no hearts. Scenario 3, and final scenario. So, in scenario 3, let's say that our blue flowers go from low to high, purple flowers go from high to low, and our red flowers go from low to high. Put our dots, and then connect them. In scenario 3, we've basically flipped what is more fit in our environment. We've basically said, okay, the things that used to be good are no longer good, and the things that used to be rare and not very good are now great. In this example, if they're all using flowers for camouflage, a disease attacks and kills most of the purple ones, so the blues and the reds can increase, which means our purple butterflies go down, and our blue butterflies go up, and our red butterflies go up. This can throw a whole environment for a loop, but again, nature wants to try to balance out the best it can. So even though this may seem like it's going to flip the whole thing on its head, it's just balancing kind of on the other end of the spectrum for these traits. This is called disruptive selection. Disruptive selection is going to cause the most change, but it's just another type of balance on the other end. So, quick review of our 3 for our butterflies. Scenario 1, Scenario 2, Scenario 3. You have the nice even curve. If something happens and blue goes down, purple goes up, red goes up, and as a result of that, you kind of had a new color pop up on the right side, you get this. Remember, this is called directional. It's going to shift our average. That means we still have an average and we still have rare stuff, but it shifts it over in a direction, directional. In scenario 2, we said that something happened in the environment that made purple not only the average, but like completely overtaking everything else, where the rare things couldn't even survive. That means it all gets wiped out and we get this nice graph right here. This is called stabilizing. Our extremes, which is basically all of our rare colors, they go away. And finally, scenario 3, we said that everything got flipped on its head. Blue became common, purple got hurt, red became common, pink still doesn't exist because we didn't shift over into that spectrum, and you get this angry thing right here. Even though these could all be disruptive, this is probably the most disruptive. So disruptive, fitness of the traits flips. That means something that was once fit, which means it was once good and beneficial, is now not. And the stuff that was not beneficial now is. Blue's more fit, purple's less fit, red's more fit. These are our natural selection graphs. The butterfly is going to try to find a way to survive. Nature's going to try to balance it out the best it can. And eventually you're going to have something emerge that is most suited for the new environment after the craziness went down. And if this continues to happen in environments over hundreds and thousands and even millions of years, you can get completely new species because they have shifted so many traits and moved so many traits around with mutation. You get a completely new species. And then over time you have lots of species branch out, which leads us into evolution. But we will dive into that in another video.